Oh boy. Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. Some of y'all might remember we're kind of on the topic of modern Mosins. How much can you modernize a Mosin? Should you modernize a Mosin? In certain situations, can you even modernize Mosins? A lot of questions that are come around this topic, and some of y'all might remember this gun in particular. This is, of course, David Shipman. Now, the last time we looked at David Shipman, who is one of our moldy leprosy Mosins, he had an Aim Sport Gen 2 Scout scope mount that was mounted here on the rear sight base. And that one was pretty interesting. It was like a $17 mount. Seemed to work fairly well. There are a few problems. One, it was kind of cheap and you get what you pay for. It worked, but the quality was fairly low, I would say. And another problem that a lot of people, now I haven't experienced this, but I haven't really done a lot of shooting. Actually, I don't think I've done any shooting with an Aim Sport mount, but some people that I've seen have said that the little screws which go in here on the sight base to secure it, they would replace this pin that goes through here, this cross pin that secures the rear sight to the sight base. These tiny little screws, people would actually have them shear off. And I can totally see how that could happen. These guns generate quite a lot of recoil. They're very powerful weapons, and I could see that really cheap Chinesium screw shearing off relatively easily and relatively quickly. So I thought that was an interesting option, and I think for the casual shooter who maybe has something like this, maybe a muzzle brake or a really heavy gun, that may not be that much of an issue, especially if you don't shoot it that much. But I looked around and I thought, all right, so that's kind of the cheapest option. What would be the ultimate scope mount for a Mosin that doesn't require you to permanently modify your rifle? And folks, boy, did I find one. This bad boy that we're looking at here today is the Bad Ace Tactical, as in the Ace of Spades, Bad Ace Tactical no drill scope mount for 9130 round receivers. Okay, so let's dissect that a little bit. What is this abomination? So this is an all aluminum scope mount. This costs right around, I think it's about $135 for the mount, which is a lot more than that Aim Sport mount, but this is much, and I cannot stress this enough, much higher quality than the Aim Sport mount. Now, the Aim Sport mount is still an okay mount, especially for the money, but again, we're looking for the ultimate one. If you want to go all out, what is the best one you can get? And I firmly believe it's this guy right here. So the mount is pretty long, as you can see. It's this long. I mean, that's quite long. It's probably a foot long at least. But there's a number of reasons this guy's awesome. It's extremely high quality aluminum. And aluminum's nice because it's a lot lighter weight than steel. It doesn't, I mean, it's going to add some weight to your rifle, but it's not going to be, a deal breaker for most people, I would say. If it was steel, that would probably be another ballgame, but I believe this is aluminum. And it's really, I mean, it's heavy, it's got some weight, but it's not as bad as you'd probably think for being a foot-long mount. But how does this actually secure to the rifle? Because this is really what's interesting about this mount, and it's why you potentially might need this for your rifle if you're interested in scope mounts. So remember I said the Aim Sport Gen 2 mount has these little tiny screws that go in here, one on each side, and they replace the pin. Well, that's not really that good of a design. In fact, the best design is to keep the cross pin, because that's the original design. It's very strong. The cross pin is not going to shear off under recoil. So I wanted to look for a mount that, A, it had that cross pin to secure it rather than the tiny little screws. And this one has that, I'm very pleased to say. But this also takes the genius idea of the Gen 2 Aim Sport rail, which is it has this little base, okay? And the little base sits underneath the sight base right here. There's a little notch under the sight base. And that notch is where it would hold captive the leaf spring for the original sight. But instead, that base sits under there, and the base is threaded, so you can actually screw something into that and it won't move around. And that's how this guy works. This whole mount is secured. It's very simple. One cross pin. You could even probably reuse the cross pin that was in your gun. And one screw. Now this one's nice because it's a Torx head, so it's really easy to get a nice firm fit on this, unlike, you know, the original Mosin screws, which are flat heads, or even Allen heads. I quite like Torx, so I'm glad they went with that. They didn't cheap out on this mount, folks. And it's Loctited down into that base, and as you can see, this is rock steady. So the whole base actually makes contact back here on the receiver, but there's no drilling required. If I wanted to, I could push out this cross pin, heat up my Loctite, and just take off this screw, and the whole mount's going to come off, and I can put my original rear sight back on here. In fact, in order to install this scope mount, I don't even have to take my rifle out of the stock. It's very simple. Anyone could install this mount, and it's very effective. Now, on the round receivers, Bad Ace Tactical claims that the roundness underneath, the shape underneath the scope mount, will basically give you perfect bore alignment. I don't know about that. It sounds very nice. It's certainly going to give you very good bore alignment at the least. So that's another big pro of this. So what guns will this work on? Well, as I said, this mount is specifically for round receivers. The contour underneath here, the profile, is matching to a round receiver. But they also make these mounts for hex receivers. So if you have an older 9130 with a hex receiver, you can put this on there as well. But you just need to get a different mount. They make a specific mount of these for the hex receiver. And if you're interested in looking at these, I'll have a link to their website where you can take a look at this mount. Now, unfortunately, this is the drawback of this mount. It will not work on most carbines. So, you know, your 1907 carbines, this won't work on. Your M38 carbines, your M44 carbines, this isn't going to work for you. But this will work on 9159 carbines. So if you have one of those laying around, those are actually generally really good shooters. They really have nice borers, all the ones I've seen. They're beautiful guns. If you have one of those and you want to make a really cool short carbine sniper rifle thing, you can do this because the 9159s have the 9130 sight base. Now, Bad Ace Tactical does make a different style mount for the carbine variants, specifically for the M44 and M38 that have that shorter sight base. Now, unfortunately, it's not quite the same mount setup, so it's actually going to be more similar to the Aim Sport Gen 2 mount. And this brings us to another good point and an interesting difference between the Bad Ace Tactical No Drill Ultimate Scope Mount and the Aim Sport Gen 2 Scope Mount, which is, of course, that the Aim Sport is for long eye release scopes, because with that, the scope would be mounted up here. What makes this scope mount so novel is not only is this the best no-drill scope mount for the Mosin that I could possibly find, it also somehow manages to provide you enough rail far enough back where you could mount shorter eye relief scopes like I have here. I have a Belarusian POSP variable zoom from, I think this one's 3 to 9? It is 2 to 9. I think it's 3 to 9. Really nice optic. Pretty expensive. It's got an illuminated reticle. This thing is built like a tank, extremely heavy. But still, I mean, it's not bad, especially with the lightweight polymer Archangel stock. It's really not that bad, folks. So as you can see here, the eye release still, it works. I just think this is incredible. You can mount a normal scope. Traditionally, with the no-drill Mosin scope mounts, you always had to get that long eye relief scope. But if you had a normal scope laying around with a shorter eye relief, you might be able to get that to work on this guy, which is really cool. Now this fits just barely. I'll flip this guy around here. This fits just barely with the curved bolt handle. In this case, we have a Hurst shifter. But as you can see, I mean, pretty close clearance, but it doesn't hit the mount, and it works pretty well. So they really thought this mount through, I have to say. I am thoroughly impressed. In fact, I'm so impressed, I have to say that I have seen mounts that people have drilled and tapped their Mosins to install that aren't as secure as this mount seems to be. And that's saying a lot, folks. Now, again, the price, $135, that's kind of up there, right? I mean, that ain't cheap by any stretch of the imagination. But in my opinion, you get what you pay for. And we saw that with the AIM Sport Gen 2 mount, and we see it again here. If what you're looking for is the ultimate Mosin Nagant scope mount, where you don't have to permanently modify your rifle, this is a great option. In fact, this is such a great option, as I said before, I think this is better than a lot of the drill and tap mounts that are out there. And you don't have to permanently modify your rifle. So we love that here on the channel. You don't have to permanently modify the history. If I wanted to, I could pretty easily get this gun back into its original configuration, 9130 with the wood stock and everything, and you never would have known that the gun looked like this. And I think that's the most incredible thing. Again, we got our Texas Precision muzzle brake up here. Our grip rod, this guy deploys with a push of a button. There's all sorts of stuff you can do to customize this. Now, we're not really talking about the stock here, we're talking about the mount, but again, would I recommend this? Absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to get some time down range with this. So if you guys like this video, let me know, and maybe we'll do another shooting segment where we get this guy on a bench and we check out how he groups at, 100 or 200 yards. I think that might be kind of fun. The trigger's actually pretty good on this one. The Hurst shifter it makes for a really nice trigger pull, which I appreciate. That's actually not a joke, that's true. Yeah, this is a weird gun. But yeah, overall, this is a really cool setup, and I don't know, maybe this gives you inspiration for a build of your own, but, for the longest time, I always wanted to be able to put, like, just a normal scope with a Picatinny mount on a Mosin, right? Having a Picatinny mount on a Mosin is just cool, especially if you could take it off again, right? So you don't have to tell anyone that you actually did it, because some people would find that to be the ultimate shame. Not me, though, and y'all know that. But I just think this is so cool. You could mount anything you want to on here. You could mount a EOTech, an Elcan, a Chinese red dot, anything you could think of, you could mount it on here. And you've got, how many notches you've got? You've probably got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 12 notches here on the rail. Maybe 13. It's kind of hard to tell with this scope on, but it gives you a lot of room for customizability. You could even mount, some canted, 45-degree canted mounts on here, put some canted iron sights, or put like a canted red dot for closer quarters if you wanted to do that as well. So just all sorts of really awesome options. And I want to give a big shout out to Bad Ace Tactical. They did not contact me about this mount. They did not pay me to do this. Y'all know I don't take money from anybody. If I see something that's good, I'm gonna let y'all know. And folks, this mount is good. So if you've got a Mosin, and specifically a 9130 rifle or a 9159, and you'd like to mount a scope on it, maybe you just want to take it out hunting, this would be an awesome setup for deer season if y'all are prepping your Mosin. A lot of people, I think, like to hunt deer with Mosins with iron sights. That's cool if you can see it, but I tell you what, it can be pretty hard to see for a lot of us at 100 or 200 yards with those 9130 sights. So giving the flexibility that this provides, I mean, realistically, only 135 bucks. That's a lot cheaper than, you know, buying a new rifle, especially if you already have a scope to go on here. But again, there's just some really good budget scope options from Vortex or Primary Arms you could go with. So for really not that much money, only, you know, 300 bucks, you could turn your Mosin into something just crazy. So hopefully that gives y'all some inspiration to do some cool stuff. If y'all do end up doing something like this, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me an email, send me some pictures of your build. I'd love to see it. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Bad Ace Tactical No Drill Ultimate Mosin Nagant Scope Mount. If y'all got any questions, again, shoot me an email. Let me know if y'all got any prayer requests, and we'll see you next time.